This is a Hot Pie Original.
Look, I doubt that I'll go here again. It's probably pointless, but I'm going to try because I think it's unavoidable right now. So I'm going to try to frame this in a way that is not about your right. I know that's a weird thing to say, but please try to have some nuance. This is not about your right. The normal path on a gun discussion is you agree or disagree. In particular, you disagree. Then you say, F you. Argument over. Don't do that. Don't. Let's try a different approach for a change. Because we're forced. Honestly, we're forced. Maybe a one-off. In fact, I'm predicting right now this is going to be a one-off. But we're forced to think of this in a different way. I think you're completely irresponsible if you don't think it through. So let's own, just for conversation's sake, let's own that it is your right. Take that out of the discussion. Take it off the table for the sake of discussion. By the way, for full disclosure, to get this out of the way, I'm a person who typically defaults to your individual right on practically everything. But because you can do something doesn't make it any less irresponsible. It doesn't make it any less idiotic. And because you can, it doesn't make it any less disconnected from common sense. That's the frame. That's what we're talking about. We're not. If you want to just go F you, then move right along. So there's the political frame to this. And this one seems tougher to explain. But you go right ahead. You give all of this a try. And I didn't say this because we're arguing about your right. I'm arguing about what chiefs of police are now saying. And that is zero training and zero background is a recipe for disaster. And that's the quote. And by the way, that's not the quote from the talk show host. That's not the quote from the person sitting at the bar. That's not the quote from a person in Austin, Texas, wearing Birkenstocks, having coffee right now. That's the comment from the pros. So don't say, I want to fight with you, hippie. Say, I want to fight with you, chief of police. That's what you should be saying. That's the frame. And don't run from the frame. Run straight to the argument with the pros. So there's the political frame. And the talk show host is almost stepping aside. I'm just helping frame the argument. Forget the argument. I'm helping frame the discussion. That's it. That's the goal. Just frame the discussion. So explain then how this is not a stupid idea. How this is not for short-term political gain. And by the way, ask yourself first and foremost, why this? Why now? Why? Why? And I'll ask it again and again and again. Why this? Why now? If your answer, by the way, is, well, just because, then I find that hard to believe. But if your answer is just because, shut up, then you're impossible. You can't be a part of the discussion. I can't frame this in a way that makes any sense to you. So move on. Say F you. If your answer is only just because, and I don't think most thinking human beings, including people that do take pride in being responsible gun owners, I don't believe your answer is just because. I don't believe it. If it is, make it. Why this? Why now? What is the answer? Why this? Why now? What prompted this? What do you think prompted this? I have an answer, but what do you think prompted this? So let's talk about the disconnect. The disconnect. Didn't say you're right. Not arguing a right. We're just talking about common sense or lack of common sense. So let's talk about the disconnect. If you're a person that is responsible, I'll make the assumption most people are. But if you are a person that is responsible, that is trained, how are you not bothered by this? Honestly, how are you not bothered by this? How does your voice not matter if you are bothered by this? How are you not saying, why this? Why now? Don't you want to separate yourself? I mean, don't you want to, at some level, be rewarded with the common sense of being trained. I didn't say by law. I didn't say by right. I'm saying just by practical responsibility. Don't you want to own? Wait a minute. I've taken the time to be responsible here. I want to know what I'm doing with this gun. I want to know where I'm going with this gun. I want to know why it is that I'm carrying this gun. I want to do the right thing. Surely you exist. Aren't you saying why this, why now? Aren't you slightly concerned this is a bad look for me and I'm bothered by it? I'm trying to do the best I can. And this is a bad look for me. How are you not saying that? Why this, why now? Why this, why now? Just keep saying it out loud. Why this, why now? So there is part of the disconnect. How do you answer the chiefs of police? How do you answer the fact? The fact. You know what the fact is? And one of the things the cops are bringing up. And that is, by the way, it's House Bill 1927. It removes the requirement for Texas residents to get a license in order to carry handguns. Okay? That's zero. Zero training, zero background, zero. I didn't argue you're right. I just argue what's common sense. For perspective, and this is what the cops are saying. And apparently they don't matter. Dallas police officers go through 38 weeks of training to get out of the academy. I assume that's pretty comprehensive across the board, but let's just talk about the Dallas police chief. I dare say he's kind of a pro. You're not. I'm not. 38 weeks of training. That includes drawing their weapon 2,000 times during the training. I'm betting that number that the talk show host didn't throw out, the pro threw out, the chief of police. The people you pay to be pros, that's 2,000 times to figure out what to do. And you know what? Even in those cases, every now and then, the pros get it wrong. So why is 0 and 0 a good idea? Why this, why now? They're asking why this, why now? The pros. But that's not even counting. I assume that's not even counting the time year round. Let's say you're on average on the force 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Think how many times they practice for that. Why this, why now?
Hey, I'm here with John McClellan, the creator and founder of ATX Hot Sauce. And when I say that you started this, maybe not screwing around in your kitchen, but maybe not that far removed from screwing around in your kitchen. So talk about the creation, the process, the dream that came out of the pandemic.
It's from Austin, from Texas. There's not a lot of hot sauces out there that are actually from here. There's a few great ones too. But, Frank's and Tabasco and some of these other ones, I want something that's Texan like me. It's different. And I think that's what Texas is a little bit about. That's what Austin's about. So that flavor first, without the vinegar, and then going into the heat after that, but not a blow your head off heat. If you notice, a lot of the hot sauces out there that you see are like Da Bomb or Death's Door, right? Yeah. And they're just supposed to blow your head off when you do it, when you taste it. Well, that's not the kind of hot sauce that I'm making. I'm making a hot sauce for the everyday person, for the condiment for every single day. And that's why the flavor first, heat second is so important, that you get those flavors, the nuances, whatever food that you're making.
All right, order a box now. It's atxhotsauce.com, atxhotsauce.com.
So even if you have minor training, that pales in comparison. In other words, you're not that good. Even with minor training, you're not that good. With 0, you're really not that good, are you? Explain how this is not a stupid idea. Explain how this is not a stupid idea. Don't explain just F you, Jeff, I can. Explain how it's not a stupid idea. You know why I say explain why it's not a stupid idea? Because the cops are saying it's a stupid idea and nobody seems to be listening. Why is no one listening? So the political disconnect. And here's the part that I think is, to me at least, most confusing. Because I'm sorry, I'm lost on your argument. I respect your right. I'm lost on your common sense argument. Completely lost. That number of 2,000 times of practicing for the pros, that seems to be a pretty good idea. So I'm lost on the responsible person, how you don't matter in this equation. Even more importantly, I'm confused. No, I'm not going to pretend to be confused. I'm going to go ahead and own being completely cynical. And I think you should as well. So this is the part that's confusing. So the very lawmakers, think about this. Right now in this state, the argument, just like several other southern states, the very lawmakers, along with the very voters who rant about supporting the police, the lawmakers who pass legislation, let's be clear about this, regarding funding the police and the argument of defunding the police. The popular move of today is to say, I'm behind the police. I'm standing with the police. I'll pass legislation to back up the police. That's the voters and the legislators. How are they not saying F you to the cops? How do you sell this? How do you square that one? How do you frame that argument? I want to hear how somebody, Greg Abbott, I want to hear how you frame it. In one discussion, in one rant, you talk about how important it is that we support the police. When the police come out and say, this is a stupid idea, how come you're not listening to me? Well, I'm sorry, it's pretty clear you don't really give a flip what they say. So how concerned are you about the police? Because the very day that they're saying, and they're saying it publicly, not the talk show host, the cops, are saying, man, you really, really made my job more dangerous. You don't seem to care, do you? How do you answer for that? What is that answer? How do you answer to them? Why this? Why now? Does anybody want to explain that? How can you get away with talking out of both sides of your mouth? Not only talking out of both sides of your mouth, but passing legislation completely out of both sides of your mouth. Oh, we care about the cops. Don't defund them, which is BS anyway. But forget it. Let's just play along. But then when they say, hey, man, don't do that, you're going to put me in danger. You're talking about keeping me safe. You're talking about training me better. You're talking about funding me better. And you jackasses just made my life miserable. How come no one's listening to them? Because the people that say we care most about you don't seem to care that much. How do you explain this? How do you explain it? Answer, please. Where did I come up with all this, and why will this be a one-off? Because talking about guns is a dead-end street. But you know why this should come up and why it should come up right now? Because anybody with a thinking bone in their body, any responsible human being, could not avoid what the Dallas police just said publicly about this whole thing. Hang on. Hair replacement ad first, of course.
We have no idea who the good guy is. You know, I heard time and time again, legislatures say, well, the good guys are going to carry guns. Well, nobody wears a T-shirt that says I'm the good guy. So when we already go to these calls that we have our family violence, which is the most problematic and most dangerous call that we operate in law enforcement. And we already have 4, 5, 7 people yelling and screaming. Half of them are intoxicated, either by induction of drugs or alcohol. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to figure out who the bad guy and the good guy is. Now let's just throw in 5 or 6 of them that are all carrying a gun. And we have no idea who the bad guy is. And it just ratchets it up, that heightened safety measure that every officer has to have when they respond to a scene. It's going to create problems. And I'm not saying that it's not something law enforcement can't deal with. We obviously have dealt with other problematic laws that are on the book. The problem is this one, there will always be a gun involved.
How come you don't care about him? How come you don't listen to him? Forget me. Forget the average person. How come you don't listen to him? You said you cared about what you care about his job. You spend day and night campaigning on caring about that guy. He's a pro. It's not me. That's the pro. I don't know. That's a giant police department. It deals a lot of problems, man. They get shot at. They're pros. You suck, you average knucklehead. You can't shoot. The pros are saying, why'd you do this? Okay, so why'd you do it? Why did you do this? Why did you do just the opposite of what that man just said? How come you didn't listen to him? You diss the Austin City Council that's not supporting the police. Okay. You would mock the average citizen who would rant about guns. Forget the rest of us. Forget the Austin City Council. address him, address exactly what he just said. Why doesn't it matter? Why this, why now? And I tell you why I think it's why this, why now. I've done a very decent job of framing this in a way that all of you could have an argument, that I think the argument should be between that cop and the rest of you, that cop and the legislature, that cop, and I'll add another person to that, the responsible gun owner who goes out of their way to train themselves, who does all they can to say, man, if I ever have to pull this thing, I better get it right. That person, you, how come nobody seems to be listening to you? Why don't you matter more? Because I don't believe you don't care. I don't believe that. You paid money. You went out of your way to train yourself. You've done the best you can. And honestly, you're still probably not very good, but at least you're better than the knucklehead that has zero training. Why aren't you bothered by that? Why are the two most important people in the room about this discussion completely ignored? The cops and the responsible gun owner. Why don't you matter more? I was about to say I don't get it, but I do get it. And it sucks. It is hypocritical. It is offensive. It is pathetic. And anytime you hear "we back the blue," you should say, shut your hypocritical face. You're a liar. You do not. Because if you cared, you would have listened to that guy. You would listen to him, because he's the one that gets shot at. He's the one in chaos. And he's saying to you directly, you made this more chaotic. Why is it being done? I don't know. I'll offer a thought. You want to say it's righteous? Go ahead. I've already dared you to make an argument that it's righteous. I've dared you to make an argument that it makes sense. I've dared you. Not F you, make a legitimate argument. But I think this is pretty clearly what might come up today and every day, and that is the full-on knuckleheadization. Yes, that's a word. Google it. Of the Republican Party. You've gone full knucklehead. I think you've gone offensive and hypocritical in being so knuckleheaded, because I think this issue is really wrong to the cops. Forget the rest of us. Really wrong to the cops. There isn't a need for this, and you know it. There isn't a need for zero training, zero background. There's not, and you know it. Responsible gun owners can't be okay with this. Maybe you are, but I doubt it. It flies in the face of what law enforcement says. So there is no level of common sense, no pressing need, unless you've got something else I'm missing, no pressing need for this. I think this is going to come up a lot, and I think this is all that matters, and this is pathetic. I think this is nothing more than Fox News clickbait. That's what I think is going on. That's how simple-minded and hypocritical a guy who used to have some common sense, Greg Abbott, has become, or legislators. Look, there may be, I'm not arguing, you've got some crazy uncle somewhere that believes it's the Wild West. That person does exist. But these are people passing laws. And I think they're passing laws and jumping at the chance to stick their face in front of a camera because it's nothing more than Fox News clickbait.